My casino manager spread rumors I'd abandoned the business while counting cash with my employees and laughing. When I confronted him, he bragged, "I haven't seen that effer in months. He doesn't give an F about this place." I just stared at him. That was 8 months ago. Yesterday, he was sitting on the floor surrounded by shredded paper, head in his hands. I'd been away from my casino on personal leave and wanted to see how my employees operate when no one's breathing down their necks. So instead of scheduling a formal inspection, I showed up unannounced while my manager was in Singapore, and nothing could have prepared me for what I went through that night. I walked through the front doors and immediately noticed something was off. The security guard at the entrance looked at me with obvious disgust. I'd dressed down in an old shirt and worn jeans and hadn't shaved for 3 days to avoid being recognized. "Otro gringo drogadicto gastando su cheque de welfare," he muttered to his partner, another substance-head white boy wasting his welfare check, which made them both laugh. Though I understood every word, I kept quiet and headed for the penny slots. The cocktail waitress passed by my machine 3 times before I finally got her attention. When she saw my small pile of crumpled bills, she told me water was free, but I'd need to pay up front for anything else. She actually wiped her hands on her apron after touching my money. It was clear she thought that I couldn't afford it. The dealer at the nearest blackjack table kept glancing over and told his colleague, "Estos tipos siempre golpean a sus esposas cuando pierden." These types always hit their wives when they lose. My luck got better when I won $30 on the slots, but when I went to cash out, the cashier immediately called security over. "Revisa si este yonki robó fichas," she said, telling them to check if this junkie stole any chips. The security guard bumped me hard into the machine before patting me down aggressively, his hands rough as he checked every pocket. As he did that, the men laughed that my kids were probably home hungry while daddy got high at the casino. The commotion had drawn the attention of a pit boss who strutted over like he owned the place. He took one look at me and shouted that I was exactly the type who'd pimp out his own mother for substance money. The other employees laughed and agreed, with one suggesting I probably already had. A female dealer added that men like me were why she carried pepper spray, that we were all potential rapists who couldn't handle rejection. Another employee chimed in that I looked like the kind of pervert who hung around playgrounds. I forced myself to stay calm and turned back to the dealer, trying to keep my voice steady. Someone else muttered that I probably lived under a bridge. "Where's the owner of this place?" Suddenly, he burst out laughing. "I haven't seen that effer in months. He doesn't give an F about this place." My heart dropped. The reason I had taken leave was to help take care of my newborn baby girl. 8 months of sleepless nights and diaper changes while my company fell apart. All I could think about was my personal leave, how my manager had sworn he'd maintain the highest standards. But things took a darker turn when I headed to the bathroom, because that's when I noticed staff members leading teenagers through a side door into a back room I hadn't authorized. Following at a distance, I found young kids, some who couldn't have been older than 13, sitting at rigged slot machines. A staff member slapped food from a crying girl's hands. "Los ganadores comen, los perdedores juegan," ladró. Winners eat, losers play. They were hunched over machines with dark circles under their eyes, some barely able to keep their heads up. Another girl who looked around 9 was softly crying as she pressed the buttons, and I heard a staff member tell her she still owed $300 before she could leave. I recognized what was going on immediately. Any high-end casino owner would. They were using children as collateral for their parents' debts. The rage that built in my chest was unlike anything I'd ever felt. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, unable to stay silent any longer. The night manager grabbed me by the collar, his face twisted in anger. In Spanish, he told the others I was just another gringo trying to play hero, probably hoping to touch the kids myself. Before I could respond, he was calling for security, shouting that I'd seen too much. 2 guards appeared immediately, one landing a solid punch to my stomach that doubled me over before dragging me through the casino. My feet scraped against the carpet as they hauled me like a sack of garbage, and I could taste blood in my mouth from where I'd bitten my tongue. But I wasn't worried, because when all was said and done, I was going to use my power to make them pay. Outside in the parking lot, bleeding from my mouth, I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and texted my manager in Singapore, demanding an immediate video call. Through the glass doors, I could see the night manager watching me, that same twisted smile on his face as he mocked me with exaggerated gestures. My hands trembled as I typed, blood dripping onto the screen. The Singapore manager didn't answer. Of course he didn't. I sat in my car for a moment, spitting blood into a napkin, then drove straight to my home office. My rage had crystallized into something cold and purposeful. I logged into the casino's cloud backup system, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I began pulling security footage from the past weeks. What I saw made my stomach turn. Children being brought in through side entrances, parents signing papers while crying, kids slumped over machines for hours, staff members physically preventing them from leaving. My hands shook with rage as I watched weeks of recorded abuse unfold on my screens. My wife found me at 3 a.m., still watching footage. She gasped when she saw a child crying at one of the machines, and her face went white. The child looked exactly like her nephew from her sister's family. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin as we watched the timestamp. It was from just 2 weeks ago. I needed answers. At the local 24-hour diner, I met my head of security off duty. duty. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. After making sure we weren't being watched, he admitted he'd been threatened to stay quiet about the backroom operations. His hands shook as he described what he'd seen, how they'd threatened his family if he spoke up. The next morning brought another shock. I discovered the Singapore trip was fake. My manager had been in town the whole time, orchestrating everything. The hotel records showed no check-in, no flights booked, nothing. He'd been here, running this operation right under my nose while I'd been home with my daughter. Driving past the manager's house at dawn, I saw him leaving with the night manager. They were counting cash and laughing, thick stacks of bills passing between them. My knuckles went white on the steering wheel as I watched them celebrate their profits from exploiting children. At my lawyer's home, still early morning, I learned the harsh reality. Reporting to authorities would trigger a lengthy investigation that could shutter the casino for months. Hundreds of legitimate employees would lose their livelihoods. My lawyer's face was grim as he explained the choice I faced: justice or jobs. My wife called while I was driving home. Her voice was shaking. She'd been getting threatening calls about our baby. The caller knew specific details, like how the nursery window faced east. Someone had been watching our house, studying our routines. My blood ran cold. Back at the casino's corporate office, I found more evidence of the conspiracy. Employment records had been altered. The worst offenders were now listed as model employees with glowing reviews. Someone had been systematically covering their tracks, creating a false paper trail. My assistant manager, one of the few I still trusted, broke down in my office. Through tears, she admitted she'd been documenting incidents but was too scared to report them. She'd watched children being brought in, seen the fear in their eyes, but they'd threatened her elderly mother if she spoke up. I obtained copies of the altered employee files. The systematic cover-up was extensive. My own signature had been forged on promotions for the worst offenders. They'd been planning this for months, maybe longer, creating a web of false documentation. At the country club where my wife had her weekly tennis lesson, the manager appeared with my wife's best friend. He made veiled threats disguised as friendly conversation, mentioning how dangerous the world was for children these days. My wife's friend seemed oblivious, but my wife saw right through it. That evening, my wife found our garage door mysteriously open and the baby's car seat had been moved. Nothing was stolen, but the message was clear. They could get to us anytime they wanted. My wife demanded I drop everything, terrified for our daughter's safety. Reviewing old text messages late that night, I realized the manager had been grooming me for months. Every update about maintaining standards now read like mockery. He'd been laughing at me the whole time, playing the dutiful employee while corrupting my business. At the bank the next morning, I discovered large cash withdrawals from casino accounts, all authorized with forged signatures over the past 6 months. The scale of the embezzlement was staggering. They'd been bleeding the casino dry while I'd been focused on my family. The pediatrician's office called that afternoon. Someone claiming to be me had tried to access my daughter's medical records. The receptionist had gotten suspicious and refused, but it was another clear threat. They were showing me how vulnerable we were. My brother-in-law, a city councilman, warned me that the manager had been spreading rumors, stories about my mental breakdown, my abandonment of the business. He was laying groundwork to discredit me if I tried to expose him. Late that night at the casino's secondary entrance, I watched from my car as the manager escorted a sobbing woman inside. I recognized her from the local food bank where my wife volunteered. Another desperate parent caught in their web. Using my master key after hours, I searched the manager's office. Hidden in a locked drawer, I found a ledger documenting the child debt scheme. My hands shook as I read it. He'd actually coined a term for it: juice kids, children whose labor paid off their parents' gambling debts. My head chef quit via text the next morning. He couldn't work somewhere that serves monsters. The manager had told the staff I'd approved everything, that this was my idea. My reputation was being systematically destroyed. That night, I noticed my home security system had been accessed remotely while we slept. The cameras had been turned off for 2 hours. Someone had been in our yard, maybe even in our house. My wife clutched our daughter tighter. A cocktail waitress approached me at a gas station, looking terrified but determined. She'd been keeping photos on her phone of bruises on children who'd been in the back room too long. Her hands shook as she showed me the evidence. My best friend since high school called with disturbing news. The manager had offered him $50,000 to convince me to take another mental health break. He knew about my father's breakdown years ago and was trying to use it against me. The next day, I saw the manager leaving my pediatrician's office, chatting warmly with the receptionist about security concerns. He was everywhere, infiltrating every aspect of our lives, showing me he could reach us anywhere. The casino's head of marketing resigned after the manager threatened to expose her recovery from addiction if she didn't support his version of events. One by one, my allies were being eliminated or turned against me. The manager started dating my wife's best friend that same week. I feel so sick for him watching all these innocent people get pulled into this nightmare. His wife finding their garage door open with the baby's car seat moved like I don't even know what I would do, lol. I can't imagine how scared they must feel knowing these monsters can reach their baby anytime they want. He showed up at our weekend barbecue with expensive toys for all the children, charming the other parents while his eyes tracked my every movement. My wife gripped slipped my hand under the table as he regaled everyone with stories about his charitable work with underprivileged youth. I recognized his manipulation pattern immediately, the same isolation tactics he'd used on 3 previous employers, according to records I'd uncovered. First, befriend the inner circle, then systematically turn them against the target. The pattern was so clear now that I'd seen his employment history. A janitor who worked nights approached me in the casino parking garage. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands, showing me videos of children being brought in through the loading dock at 3 a.m. In one video, a small boy called the manager Uncle while being led inside. The janitor had been recording for weeks, too scared to come forward until now. My neighbor mentioned casually over the fence that the manager had been asking about our family routines. He'd been particularly interested in when my wife and daughter were home alone. The manager had claimed he was planning a surprise party for me, but my neighbor's instincts had told him something was off. I arranged a reconciliation meeting with the manager at a local restaurant, my phone recording in my pocket. He bragged to the night shift supervisor about his complete control over the casino, how he'd turned my own employees against me. His arrogance was his weakness. He couldn't resist gloating about his power. The gaming commission dismissed my anonymous tip without investigation. They claimed the allegations were unsubstantiated without proper evidence. The manager had connections there too, people who owed him favors or feared his influence. 3 casino employees met me secretly at a truck stop outside town. They'd been planning their own intervention, collecting evidence and building courage. A dealer, a cashier, and a security guard, all parents themselves who couldn't stomach what was happening anymore. Through their testimonies, I discovered the manager had been using casino vehicles to transport children from low-income neighborhoods. The company vans that should have been picking up supplies were instead collecting desperate families' children in the dead of night. The manager's ex-girlfriend contacted me through social media. She'd fled the state after discovering he'd been grooming her teenage daughter. Her story matched the pattern: charm, control, then corruption. She'd barely escaped with her daughter intact. During a confrontation at the grocery store, I remained calm while the manager grew increasingly aggressive. Other shoppers began noticing his excessive anger, his barely controlled rage. Security intervened when he knocked over a display, giving me the satisfaction of watching him escorted out. My family reunion was in 3 days. The manager had somehow gotten himself invited through my wife's friend. The thought of him near my extended family, near more children, made my skin crawl. We had to act before then. A mother broke down in the casino bathroom, confessing to my wife that her daughter hadn't been the same since visiting the casino. She showed us the child's drawings, dark, disturbing images of slot machines with crying faces, of hands reaching out from screens. The mother's tears fell on the crumpled papers. The manager's mask slipped during a private meeting when I mentioned specific dates from the ledger. His eye twitched when I cornered him with facts, his smooth demeanor cracking just enough to show the monster underneath. He recovered quickly, but I'd seen the truth. He offered to buy me out, suggested I take a long vacation with my family. When I refused, I found my car keyed in the parking lot, deep scratches spelling out a message I won't repeat. His desperation was beginning to show. Several employees independently approached me after witnessing the manager's increasingly erratic behavior. He'd been making mistakes, showing his true nature in moments of stress. The careful facade he'd maintained for months was crumbling under pressure. Security footage analysis revealed the manager had been meeting with parents at 3 a.m. in the casino parking lot, the same parents whose children would appear in the back room days later. The pattern was undeniable: desperation, negotiation, then exploitation. I realized the manager's control only extended to about a dozen corrupted employees. The rest were either terrified into silence or genuinely oblivious to the operation. This knowledge gave me hope. His empire was smaller than he wanted me to believe. A brave mother provided me with text messages from the manager explicitly outlining the debt for children arrangement. He'd actually called it alternative payment plans in writing. Her hands shook as she handed over her phone, knowing she was risking everything. My wife chose to uninvite her best friend from all social events, rather than allow the manager near our home. She saw through his act completely now, recognizing the predator behind the charm. Our marriage grew stronger as we faced this threat together. We developed a coordinated strategy to protect our family while gathering evidence. Every movement was planned, every interaction calculated. We were no longer victims, but hunters, stalking the predator who'd invaded our lives. Despite my rage, I refused to plant evidence or entrap the manager. The truth was damning enough without fabrication. Any false move would undermine the legitimate victims who deserved real justice. During a surprise confrontation at the manager's apartment complex, he accidentally admitted to destroying records. The words, "You'll never find those files," slipped out before he could stop himself. I smiled, knowing I'd already found copies in the cloud backup. Multiple parents began corroborating their coercion into the scheme through a trusted social worker. She'd been documenting cases for weeks, building a network of victims willing to speak out. The manager's web of fear was unraveling thread by thread. The night manager stopped showing up for work after other employees confronted him about the children. Without his enforcer, the manager's control weakened further. Cracks in his organization widened into chasms. Employees started openly discussing analyzing the situation in break rooms. Maintenance found "Save the Kids" written in dust on unused machines. The culture of fear was transforming into one of rebellion. My employees were finding their courage. I leveraged my relationships with local business owners to hire attorneys for affected families. Pro bono lawyers lined up to help, outraged by what they heard. The community was rallying behind the victims. Cornered in the casino vault during an inventory check, the manager snarled that he'd provided a service these worthless people needed. His mask had completely fallen away, revealing the contempt he held for everyone he'd exploited. Longtime employees began apologizing to me for not speaking up sooner. The head of slots broke down crying, remembering the children's faces. She'd been too scared before, but now shame outweighed fear. The manager's options dwindled as his co-conspirators distanced themselves. Rats fleeing a sinking ship, they began approaching me with information, hoping for leniency. Each defection brought new evidence. Through the ex-girlfriend's testimony, I learned the manager had run the same scheme at his previous job in Arizona. One child from there was still missing, having disappeared 3 years ago. The revelation sent chills down my spine. I arranged safe housing for families who wanted to leave, but feared retaliation. Using the casino's partnerships with local motels, we created an underground railroad of sorts for victims. Families disappeared in the night, relocated to safety. 27 employees signed a private statement supporting my version of events. Even those who'd initially participated out of fear now stood ready to testify. The manager's kingdom was collapsing from within. His attempts to bribe employees failed as word spread about my protection. I guaranteed jobs for anyone who came forward, promised legal support for those who'd been coerced. Money couldn't compete with redemption. The custodian who'd called me gringo that first night broke down after seeing security footage of his own nephew in the back room. He'd thought the boy was at basketball practice. The personal nature of the betrayal shattered his loyalty to the manager. Former employees started returning, having heard I was cleaning house. They wanted to be part of the casino's redemption, to help rebuild what the manager had corrupted. Good people who'd been driven away by fear came home. During a fake reconciliation dinner, I obtained the manager's personal laptop while he was distracted. My IT specialist found evidence of similar schemes in 3 other states. The manager wasn't just a predator, he was a serial predator. With the family reunion tomorrow, I faced a crucial decision: ban the manager and reveal everything to my extended family, or maintain the facade one more day. My wife and I stayed up all night debating, knowing lives hung in the balance. The manager's true nature erupted when he slapped an employee in front of witnesses for disloyalty. The security cameras captured everything: his rage, his violence, his complete loss of control. He'd given us the evidence we needed. I realized that protecting the children might mean losing the casino that had been in my family for 3 generations. The financial losses, the reputation damage, the legal battles ahead, none of it mattered compared to their safety. Instead of violent retaliation, I methodically documented every violation. My Marine training showed in my discipline, my ability to compartmentalize rage into purposeful action. Every piece of evidence was cataloged, backed up, secured. The entire dealer staff signed a petition refusing to work shifts with the manager present. They stood together in the break room, united in their defiance. Without dealers, the casino couldn't function. The manager's power evaporated. Parents began coming forward privately after I guaranteed their debts would be forgiven. One by one, they shared their stories in my office. Mothers cried, fathers hung their heads in shame, but all found courage in the promise of redemption. I secured agreements from all non-involved staff to testify if needed. Even those who'd insulted me that first night signed, their prejudices evaporating in the face of crimes against children. We were united now in purpose. The manager made a desperate play, attempting to access the casino's main safe with copied keys, but I'd anticipated this move, changing all codes and locks remotely the moment security alerted me. He found himself locked out of his own scheme. His gambling addiction surfaced during the investigation. He owed dangerous people substantial money, explaining his desperation. The casino had been his personal piggy bank, the children just another resource to exploit for his debts. My core team of loyal employees committed to rebuilding the casino's reputation together. We met in the conference room, mapping out a future free from corruption. Their dedication moved me more than any profit ever could. Local community leaders rallied behind me after learning about my efforts to protect families. The community center director offered free counseling for affected children. The isolation the manager had tried to create around me reversed completely. Using accumulated evidence, I presented an ultimatum to remaining conspirators: leave town within 48 hours or face exposure. Most packed immediately, fleeing like roaches from light. When that custodian realized his own nephew was involved, I just wanted to reach through the page and hug him, because that kind of personal betrayal must hurt so deeply. Only the manager remained, too arrogant to run. The breakthrough came when the manager's enforcer cracked. Facing his own conscience, he admitted to having recordings of orders to hurt children who resisted. His phone contained audio files that made my blood run cold, direct evidence of the manager's cruelty. 3 mothers sat in my office the next morning, each clutching tissues as they detailed how their children had been exploited. exploited. Their stories matched perfectly. Desperation, manipulation, then entrapment. One mother showed me her daughter's journal entries, pages filled with fear and confusion about the special work at the casino. My documentation proved systematic abuse spanning exactly 8 months. The dates aligned perfectly with my paternity leave. While I'd been home changing diapers, the manager had transformed my family's legacy into a nightmare. The evidence filled 3 binders, each page another nail in his coffin. Bank records revealed the full scope of the embezzlement. Over $400,000 had vanished through the child debt scheme. The manager had created shell accounts, fake vendors, elaborate paper trails, but his greed had made him sloppy. The forensic accountant found clear patterns linking everything back to him. The casino's board of directors convened an emergency meeting. All family members, my uncles, cousins, even my elderly grandmother who'd helped found the casino decades ago. They voted unanimously to support my actions, understanding that saving children mattered more than saving face. Then the manager launched his most vicious attack yet. Child Protective Services showed up at our door with a report claiming our baby was neglected. The timing was perfect, right as family members arrived for our reunion. My grandmother nearly fainted when she saw the CPS van in our driveway. The reunion turned into chaos. CPS workers interviewed family members while children played in the background, unaware of the drama unfolding. My wife held our daughter close, her face pale but determined. The false report claimed I was unstable, violent, neglecting my child while obsessing over casino conspiracies. Some employees began wavering. 2 security guards who'd been supportive suddenly seemed nervous, whispering in corners. The manager had leverage we didn't know about. Old mistakes, hidden debts, secrets that could destroy lives. I watched them struggle between conscience and self-preservation. I handled the CPS investigation alone, while my wife protected our daughter upstairs. The social worker was thorough but fair. I showed her my documentation, explained the situation calmly. My phone recorded everything. I'd learned to document every interaction, create undeniable proof of the truth. That evening, I made a decision. No more waiting, no more gathering evidence. I drove to the manager's apartment complex with everything I had. The confrontation needed to happen now, before he could hurt anyone else or manufacture more lies about my family. The manager answered his door in a silk robe, wine glass in hand. His face went white when he saw me. He tried to slam the door, but I wedged my foot in the gap. Behind him, I could see boxes packed, plane tickets on the coffee table. He was planning to run. His escape attempt triggered something primal in me. I pushed through the door as he scrambled backward, knocking over furniture in his haste. He grabbed his phone, shouting threats about ruining my life, destroying my family, ensuring I'd never see my daughter again. But his threats fell flat. I had evidence, witnesses, documentation. He had lies and desperation. As he backed into his kitchen, still ranting, I noticed his hands shaking. The predator had become prey, and he knew it. He bolted for the back door, but I'd anticipated this. My security team waited outside, loyal employees who'd volunteered to help, not for money or threats, but because they'd seen those children's faces too. The manager found himself surrounded by people he'd terrorized for months. Back at the casino, he barricaded himself in the main office with 2 remaining allies. Security feeds showed them frantically destroying documents, shredding papers, smashing hard drives. They thought they could eliminate the evidence, not knowing I had backups of everything. I entered through my private entrance, flanked by loyal security and 3 of the affected parents. The mothers who'd cried in my office now stood tall, ready to face their children's tormentor. Their presence gave me strength I didn't know I needed. The office door was locked, furniture piled against it. We could hear destruction inside, computers being smashed, papers burning in a metal trash can. The smoke alarm shrieked, but the manager kept destroying evidence, growing more frantic by the minute. Security broke through using master keys and bolt cutters. The manager stood amid the wreckage, suit disheveled, eyes wild. His 2 allies had already given up, sitting on the floor with their heads in their hands. Only he remained defiant. Cornered, he pulled out his final weapon, photos suggesting I'd known about the scheme months ago, cleverly doctored images showing me near the back room, appearing to approve operations. His hands shook as he waved them, claiming I was the real mastermind. But my assistant manager stepped forward with her own evidence. The documentation she'd mentioned weeks ago, date-stamped photos and incident reports proving I'd been on leave when the scheme began. She'd been building a file for months, protecting herself, and now protecting me. The manager's face crumbled as he realized his last gambit had failed. The parents behind me stood firm, their presence a wall of judgment. Security blocked every exit. His allies had abandoned him. The empire he'd built on children's suffering was collapsing. I faced a choice in that moment. Let him leave quietly to avoid scandal, or ensure he never worked with children again. The decision was easier than I'd expected. Some things mattered more than reputation or profit. Some evils demanded exposure. I chose transparency over silence. The manager would face justice, even if it meant publicizing my casino's shame. Local news trucks were already gathering outside, tipped off by parents who'd decided their stories needed telling. The truth would hurt, but lies had hurt worse. Police arrived within minutes, called by the parents, not me. They wanted official justice, not vigilante revenge. The manager saw uniforms through the window, and his shoulders sagged. Parents formed a line blocking his escape route, their faces hard with determination. His final manipulation attempt was pathetic. He claimed I'd orchestrated everything for publicity, that this was all an elaborate show. But the parents' testimonies, the evidence, the children's stories, they spoke louder than his desperate lies. Parents refused his last-minute bribes. He pulled out cash, promised payments, offered anything to make this disappear. But money couldn't buy back innocence or erase trauma. The parents stood firm, some crying, all resolute. I stepped forward to address everyone present. My voice cracked as I accepted responsibility for my absence enabling this situation. 8 months of prioritizing family had allowed evil to flourish. Tears stung my eyes as I faced the parents, vowing public accountability for what happened under my name. The manager saw no alternatives left. Surrounded by furious parents, abandoned by allies, evidence mounted against him, he finally broke. His confession came in a rush, trying to minimize his role while admitting enough to avoid the parents' wrath. Police took him away in handcuffs while parents watched. Some cried, others stood stone-faced, all carrying the weight of what their children had endured. The manager kept his head down, finally silenced, finally stopped. Child services coordinators arrived to ensure all affected children received proper support. Counselors would visit families, therapy would be provided, healing could begin. The community rallied to protect its most vulnerable members. The casino underwent immediate transformation. New safeguards were implemented with a community oversight board. Parents gained permanent seats, ensuring no child would ever be exploited in this building again. Their vigilance would be our conscience. The backroom's contents were hauled to the parking lot. Rigged machines, tiny chairs, the implements of exploitation, all piled high. I lit the fire myself as families watched. The furniture burned while parents held their children close, the smoke carrying away months of nightmare. Employees worked through the night, removing every trace of the corruption. Fresh paint covered stained walls. New carpet replaced worn paths where children had walked. The space was cleansed, prepared for redemption. My wife stood beside me as we watched the last embers die. Our daughter slept peacefully in her arms, innocent of the evil that had threatened her world. We'd protected her, but so many others had suffered while we'd been focused inward. The financial losses were staggering. Between embezzlement, legal fees, and necessary renovations, the casino faced ruin. But my family's board had voted. Children mattered more than money. We'd rebuild or close, but never again would profit come before people. Former employees returned over the following days. Dealers, servers, security guards who'd left in disgust came back to help rebuild. They worked for reduced wages, understanding that redemption required sacrifice. Together, we began creating something new. The district attorney took over the case, building charges that would ensure the manager never worked with children again. His previous victims from Arizona were located, their testimonies adding weight to an already overwhelming case. Justice moved slowly, but inevitably forward. My employees' attitudes transformed completely. The same guards who'd mocked me now protected families visiting the casino. The dealers who'd made cruel jokes became fierce advocates for child safety. Redemption was possible for those who truly wanted it. 6 months later, we held our grand reopening. The casino had been transformed into a family-friendly establishment. Bright colors replaced dark corners. Security cameras covered every inch. The former backroom now housed a free childcare center staffed by licensed professionals. My daughter cut the ribbon, her tiny hands guided by mine. At 18 months old, she giggled at the crowd's applause, unaware of the significance. Behind us stood dozens of families, employees, community members, and yes, some of the parents whose children had suffered. The manager served his time after taking a plea deal. His sentence was lighter than deserved, but enough to end his career. He'd never again have access to vulnerable children. Sometimes justice comes in increments, rather than grand gestures. I worked the floor alongside my employees now. No more executive office isolation. I knew every name, every face, every story. The respect I'd lost through absence was slowly rebuilt through presence. They valued my sacrifice of profit for principles. The casino operated at a loss initially. Family-friendly meant less revenue, more expenses, but clean money felt different than dirty profits. Every dollar earned came without shame, without exploitation, without destroying innocence. My marriage emerged stronger. We'd faced evil together, protected our child together, sacrificed together. The material losses meant nothing compared to maintaining our integrity. Our daughter would grow up knowing her parents chose righteousness over riches. Late at night, I sometimes walked through the transformed casino, where children once cried over rigged machines, families now laughed together. That moment when his wife stood beside him, holding their sleeping daughter, while the smoke carried away all that pain and suffering, is actually so crazy. It's beautiful how those employees came back, willing to work for less money, because they believed in making things right again. Where predators had stalked, protectors now stood guard. The building itself seemed lighter, cleansed of its dark history. The community oversight board met monthly, parents' voices ensuring history never repeated. They reviewed every policy, every hire, every decision through the lens of child safety. safety. Their vigilance was the price of our redemption, gladly paid. I kept one photo from that terrible time, the empty back room after we'd cleared it out, a reminder of how quickly evil could take root when good people looked away. 8 months of absence had nearly destroyed everything my family built over generations, but we'd survived, not unscathed, not unchanged, but intact. The casino would never recoup its financial losses, but I slept peacefully beside my wife and daughter. Some nights, that peace was interrupted by memories of those children's faces, but most nights I rested knowing we'd chosen humanity over empire. The greatest power, I'd learned, wasn't in money or influence or control. It was in the courage to sacrifice everything for what was right, to stand against evil even when it cost you dearly, to protect the innocent even when it meant destroying your own legacy. My daughter grew surrounded by that truth. She'd never know the full story until she was older, but she'd grow up in a place where children were treasured, not exploited, where community mattered more than profit, where her father had learned that true strength meant admitting weakness and fixing what was broken. The casino still bore my family's name, but it meant something different now. Not just a business, but a testament to redemption. Not just entertainment, but a safe space for families. Not just profit, but purpose. We'd paid dearly for that transformation, but some prices are worth paying. Wow, just wow. That place went from a nightmare where kids were used to being completely safe. Being a good person and caring for others is stronger than just making money. Amazing story. Thanks for watching. See you next time.